Welcome, everybody. This is Fist Dented Christians. I'm your host, DJ, and my co-host, Dustin, is here with me.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome to February. It is negative, well, in my car when I pulled up, it was negative 12. Negative 12.
It's cold.
I was thinking about that on the way over here, about people like living in Tampa Bay,
Yep.
and or even just California, Southern Cal. It's
Yep.
like they have no idea.
No.
Are we idiots for living here? It's
Possibly.
It's just insane.
Yeah.
But it makes 40s feel tropical.
Oh, yeah.
So, but yes, so it's February. We've been pretty lucky weather-wise here in the Great White North, all the way up until just pretty much the last week or so. And it's going to be cold like this for the rest of the week. So,
yes, it is.
But welcome to another episode. Today, I think we are going to continue along, kind of adding on to what we discussed during our last podcast a couple weeks back, and kind of about just kind of getting unstuck. And so today, we'll start out with today's scripture reading, which is it is from my devotional, and it's from today, so it's very fitting for the theme of what we've been discussing. February 7th, get off the bench. The scripture is from James 1:22. It says, "Be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves." And the quote is from a gentleman by the name of Edmund Burke, and it says, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." And so, before we started our podcast today, as we normally do, Dustin and I just kind of catch up with each other, and we were just talking about some of the things that we've got going on, and how was our week, and so he asked me about a podcast that I'm going to be doing just on my own, and he asked how that was going, and I just kind of stopped and said, "Dude, I didn't do anything with that. Like, I know what needs to happen, but I haven't done the next steps." And so that got us into a discussion about kind of where you're at and doing those things. So we wanted to take some time today to talk about getting unstuck.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's, well, especially during COVID, I think a lot of people feel stuck because they're physically stuck. So then it leads to being mentally stuck. And I think, a reoccurring theme that's come up in our podcast is intentionality, being intentional. And I think that I myself am guilty of, like, trying to find a shortcut to being productive. Like, if I just did this thing, or maybe if I mentally felt better, that I would be more productive. And I don't think there's a shortcut. I think it's just, you have to be intentional, and you have to constantly work at getting unstuck. Otherwise, you're going to end up stuck. It's an object in motion wants to stay in motion. An object at rest wants to stay at rest.
It's physics.
Yep. So I think for me, I was telling DJ before we started the podcast this morning that my short-term memory is horrible. Like, I want to do all these things, and then I forget about them, and I get lazy, and I watch YouTube videos, or I watch TV, or I play video games, or whatever it is. And so one of the things that DJ does every week is he does an achievement list. And then, so it's daily goals or a weekly goal, and then you check mark it as you do it. And I like that idea for me, because it's a reminder of what I want to do or what I need to do. And because I forget all the time, having that reminder would be nice. Now, I will have to get in the habit of checking the list to make sure that I actually do it, but at least that eliminates, if there's 10 things I want to do, I only have to remember one thing. Check the achievement list versus trying to remember all 10 of them. And then part of the problem then is part of the problem in the past, before I plan on starting this achievement list, is when I don't remember, then I get frustrated with myself that I forgot, or that I took so long to remember. So I think even that, it's just one less barrier, one less thing to get frustrated with yourself about, one less thing to get depressed about.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I forgot again.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like the achievement list idea.
Yeah, and I don't very rarely will go past 9 or 10 things.
Sure.
And so another thing that we were speaking of before we actually started recording was I kept a record of all of my achievement lists for basically since COVID started. So it's almost for a year. But basically, I took from March until the end of 2020. And I went back and I kind of spotted patterns of behavior.
Yep.
And so I think another resonant theme in our podcast is not only intentionality, but I also think it's self-awareness.
Yeah.
And we can't measure what we can't, or excuse me, we can't manipulate what we can't measure.
Right.
And so when I went back and looked at the patterns of behavior, and mind you, a weekly achievement list, folks, can be whatever you want it to be. I mean, it could be to get to bed early,
Right.
or it could be to just go for a walk, but every time you do that, so mine is a weekly achievement list. So if I get to the gym and swim for a day, I'll put a little check mark next to that day. And so I was telling Dustin that I have 6 check marks next to swim and gym for this week. But when I look back at the patterns, there was a glaring hole in a lack of doing in regards to the weekly achievement list as it relates to my personal investment into my writing and my creativity. And that's something I need to dig deeper into. Now, a part of me wants to say, well, you're just lazy and you're not taking the time to sit down in front of your laptop and just do the work.
Yeah.
But then another part's, well, I already sit in front of a laptop 8 hours of the day with
Right.
with my profession.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I'd rather just not stare at my TV or my laptop or my phone or whatever. You know, I can't tell if that's an excuse. And so I guess the long and short of it is that as you do this, you're going to start seeing patterns. And if you see that there's a glaring hole, like, oh, I rarely do X, why is that? And I think that's kind of the impetus of trying to figure out in terms of the unstuckness, is to try to figure out, okay, well, if I'm not taking, the time to do something, then there's definitely an emotion or a lack of motivation that's coming from somewhere. That's really deep buried. Is it DJ's fear of rejection? That if he writes 1,000 words, it's just going to be crap.
Sure.
And so I need to be intentional and self-aware about those things, but you need to be able to measure them.
Yeah.
And everybody's list can be different. But I was thinking about this when you were talking. It's a question that came up in my mind. Is what is the purpose, do you think, of unsticking ourselves? Like, what's the purpose of that? People might be listening that might be depressed or, suicidal or, what is the purpose of being unstuck? It might be a little philosophical,
but... well, I'm having a hard time because this is something that I question a lot, too, with, like, my depression when I'm not on my meds. Like, what... It almost becomes like that question is one step away from what the hell's the point of life. Like, it does become this very philosophical thing.
It kind of does.
Yeah, and I think I have this running theory that I've had for a few years, and I can't remember if I've ever mentioned it on the podcast. I'm sure I have, but if I haven't, I'll just mention it now. That up until about 150 years ago, life was brutally hard.
Yeah,
and
you did bring this up.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So it was easy back then for people to be motivated to do things because it was
survival.
Just pure survival. And we are wired, whatever faith you are, whatever non-faith you are, it's pretty clear that humans are wired to survive. We're animals, we're wired to survive. Well, now all of a sudden we have a bunch of free time. And so now the question becomes, well, what the hell's the point of existence? 150 years ago, very few people in the population could ask that question because most people were just getting up every day to cook and clean and do all that stuff to survive. So I think the point of, back to your question of what's the point of being unstuck is you don't have to be. You can choose to be stuck, but there's not a single person that I've ever run across that is happy when they're stuck. And so I used to, like, when I would deal with my own depression and all that, I would get, I guess I'd say, resentful. Like, well, what the hell? Why? Screw that. I'll just be stuck and miserable and all that. And it's like, well, what a stupid choice that is. Like, to just stay miserable. Like, you can go ahead and choose that, but you're already miserable and you're stuck. Why not try to choose something to get unstuck and maybe not be miserable? And there are times where it feels like that's impossible, and I understand that too. There have been times where I've dealt with so much depression that it literally just feels like anything I do is gonna be unsuccessful. So I'm just giving up. But it coming out the other side occasionally, and I've gone back and forth with depression where it's been really bad and then it gets better and then it goes back to really bad, but I'm in a point now where it's better because the meds I'm on are working, that I can see the benefit of, like I was telling DJ before we started the podcast, that this week I got in 3 leg workouts and 2 arm workouts, and just the feeling after, the 10 minutes to 20 minutes after that dopamine release, you're just like, okay, I did something, I accomplished something. Not only like I accomplished something, which is important, but then it was physically difficult, which is another thing too. Like I genuinely believe that physical activity is super important. So not to say that mental activity isn't, because it is very important as well, but I think getting unstuck, especially in COVID, it's important to get physically unstuck as well as mentally unstuck. And so I think, what's the importance of getting unstuck? Being unstuck.
Do you think that movement is a universal law?
It appears to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, I think even rocks change.
Yeah.
Trees change.
Right.
Time from a human construct is relative, right? But the world is in motion.
Yeah.
And I think to the degree in our minds that we inherently in our DNA know that movement, whether it be spiritual, physical, professional, personal, it's a universal law.
Right.
And so as I'm listening to you talk, which I think your insights are really good, is I'm thinking, okay, so is all this stuckness, it's coming from our thoughts, right? Or fear, or what happened to us when we were very young. There's so many dynamics, and it's very complicated and complex to just kind of dial in just even one person's motivations or lack thereof.
Yeah.
But I would say, and I guess we both agree, it sounds like, I'm not sure if the listeners do, but motion is a universal law. So if we're human beings, and not in a FOMO sense, where I'm looking at everybody else going on vacations or starting their own businesses, that's great. That's somebody else that's in motion.
Yep.
And so I have to be careful about not comparing my lack of motion to somebody else's trajectory and inertia and motion.
Yep.
we all do that. It's so easy to do that on social media.
Yeah.
Another thing too you said that I thought was really insightful was 150 years ago, people had to be in motion or they died.
Right.
And even a million years ago, if you didn't move, I mean, we are nomadic by nature.
Right.
And one of the things that I think that kind of pushes forward the mental health discussion is that we don't have to be nomadic by nature.
Right.
All I need to do, if I want butter, I'll go to the grocery store and there's 17, 20 different kinds of butter. Right? So it's a different effort that we have to exert, not necessarily physical,
right,
but by and large it made us healthy when we did that.
Yeah.
It's more a mental,
yep,
right? It's my life. Everything is so easy now.
Yep.
We don't even have to leave the house anymore.
Right.
And so our priorities start to shift, and the idea that I'm not happy. Right. Well, who the hell is happy, right? And the happiness is kind of subjective anyways. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of focus on, we want people to I want to be happy.
Right.
And it's like, well, okay, that's good. You have a right to happiness.
Yeah.
But that's where I feel like a lot of people, because they don't have to worry about how they're going to get from Roseville to frickin' Stillwater. Right. They can get in their car and they can drive there.
Yep.
Some people, other people might have to take public transportation. But my point is I feel like the world is easier to live in now, but is it with all the mental health stuff? Because
right,
we put so much importance on the idea of happiness that I think people just sort of freak out. So where was I going with this? So I was going with this in that I think movement is universal. I think it's a law. And I think that if we're not plugged into that flow of motion, we feel it.
Yeah.
And so I think the purpose of being unstuck is to just sort of align with God's creation, right? Yeah. I think you mentioned the 3 days and 2 days of lifting and arms and legs, and you felt good afterwards. Well, mm-hmm. I feel like that's because you intentionally were self-aware, yeah, that this would make you feel good, yeah, so you did it and you felt better, yeah, right? Now, yeah, does that mean that you're going to do that with the same frequency this next week? Who knows? Maybe right, not. That's okay if you don't.
Right.
But it's the continual intentionality to, like, here's my weekly achievement list. This is what I need to do. And then if you're not doing it and you see a pattern over 4 weeks or 5 or 8 weeks, then you have to sit down with yourself and think about that when you're laying in bed. It's like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So I really liked I really liked the purpose of being unstuck. Because is it to be happy? Is it to feel a sense of connection with community? The Bible passage talks about being a doer. Well, if you're a doer, that means that you're engaging with the world. And I think that that's what God ultimately wants us to do, is to be in intimate relationships or to apply your gifts, Dustin, in a way that makes you feel fulfilled, but also makes the world a better place.
Yeah.
And if that means that you work out every day because that makes you feel better, and then that sets you off on a course of positivity and enthusiasm to help other people, then that's the purpose,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
When you're depressed, and I know maybe not to the degree that you've experienced depression, but when I'm depressed, I'm not doing when I'm right, depressed. I'm doing in my head,
yeah,
but I'm not doing in the world,
right?
So I don't know.
I almost wonder if it's the purpose of being unstuck is to fulfill your purpose. Like you said, it allows you to get your gifts out into the world. And so, us being Christians, we believe that, God has blessed each one of us with certain gifts, and you get to use those gifts, which makes you feel better, and then you get to benefit others, which is a positive thing. So, and I mean, I would say even people of non-faith agree that everybody has their own things they're better at than other people. So I think it's getting to exercise what you're good at.
Oh, that reminds me of a TikTok that I saw of this girl, and I think she had taken an edible, so she's a little high.
Oh, sure.
And then she said, and this fits with what you're saying and what we're talking about, is she said, somebody said something to me the other day, and she's a Christian. She said, the last thing that I want to do is pass away and meet my Maker, and Christ or God says to me, you know what, Jamie, why didn't you use the gift I gave you?
Yeah.
Like, I gave you these gifts and you didn't use them.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want that.
Right.
I don't want to I don't want to have to face my Creator and say, yeah, I didn't know. I just didn't do it.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's what you're here for. And now for
Right.
some of you who maybe, this is obviously fist-ended Christians, so maybe non-Christians probably are not interested in it, don't listen. But, God did give us, He gave us tools.
Right.
That we're responsible for. It's not like we can choose.
Right.
But it's like, hey, I gave you, Dustin, I don't know, I just bought you a new Land Rover.
Right.
And you never drive it.
Right.
Like, why not? Like,
Yep.
it's this beautiful brand new car.
Yep.
I'm a millionaire. Here you are.
Yeah.
I don't know. God gave you this mind that is just very intuitive and instinctual and intelligent, and I feel like this podcast has been the fruition of that creative mind. But no, I like that. Keep going with that though. That God gives us these things to do, and we need to. And I'm sorry to keep talking, but I'm just going to say this. So like with the writing for DJ,
Yeah.
and you're gonna think of a mutual friend of ours when I say this next comment. But sometimes I feel like there's spiritual warfare going
Sure.
on. Like, yeah, you know what? There's good and evil, and, good recognizes the potential in DJ, but so
Yeah.
does evil
Yeah.
in the world. And so, yeah, like, you're pretty creative, and, like, you really feel good about yourself when you
Yeah.
write, and you really, like, people seem to enjoy your stories and blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
So, plink. Doubt,
Yep.
laziness.
Yep.
I don't want you to do this.
Right.
I'm going to do every barrier in your path.
Yep.
I'm going to distract you with Candy Crush.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, I think one of the things too about exercising your gifts is you never know where it's going to lead. So I was telling DJ that I've found some inspiration from this guy named Brian Shaw, who's on YouTube. He's a world's strongest man competitor. And he's won 4 times, so he's like a legit, it's tied
Wow.
for the second most all time.
4 times?
Yeah.
So he's like the Tom Brady of powerlifting.
Yeah, he's incredible. And like 3 years ago, and I just discovered him in the last 3 months, but 3 years ago he started recording videos and putting them on YouTube of him lifting, and he's with his buddies, and they do funny videos, and they do eating challenges, and his wife got involved because she's into fitness as well, so then they do Q&As with their marriage and how they fit all this training in, and they have challenges, physical fitness challenges between the two of them, and all that. And I think somebody that's not into fitness would just look at it and be like, well, he's just some meathead, putting out his videos. What does it matter? But the positive comments from people that are inspired by him because he pushes himself so hard.
Great point.
Yeah. So it's like, if you can get yourself unstuck and you can start to do positive things, you never know who else you're going to benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian Shaw, I'm sure when he started this, was like, I'm just going to put it out there, and it's interesting to me, and maybe I'll meet some new friends or whatever. And then the amount of positive energy that he's put out and the amount of inspiration that he's given, pushing through injuries and pushing himself as hard as he can. Like that's an important thing. The world, especially now, needs more positivity. We need more inspiration from each other. And that's something that if he would have just thought, I'll just stick to the World Strongman. I'm not going to post anything on YouTube. I'm not going to start my own website. I don't really care. Then everybody who's been positively impacted would miss out on that. And so I think getting unstuck, whether that means starting your own podcast or your own website or your own business or even your own family, like there's so many things that getting unstuck allows you, not only for yourself but for other people. It allows so many benefits.
You know, I love this, and I think the weekly achievement, to tie it in, because if you're like me, Dustin, you like, oh, okay, so my purpose is to become a published author, right? I want to publish my book. I have one book that's completed, and I'm working on another one now. To do that, you need a weekly achievement list. Yeah. You can't just sort of like manifest, oh, the book is done.
Right.
That it's such a lofty sort of like, it's a mountain over there. So the weekly achievement list, whatever your goal is, going back to school, starting your own business, starting a podcast, whatever.
Yeah.
It starts with a week. It's the little steps forward. And I do this in my counseling with clients, is because they'll look at their situations and be completely overwhelmed. And so I recognize that it's important to give people little digestible nuggets of activity that they can do that just kind of nudges them forward.
Yep.
And so a weekly achievement, you know, with your idea for a podcast, you know, it's like, okay, well, now I need to reach out to this person. And so that's basically a phone call, right? Yep. I need to pick up the phone and say, hey, do you know how to do this?
Yep.
It could be I want a better relationship with, you know, somebody that I have fallen out of contact with. You know? Pick up the phone and call them, right? And then you can mark that off on your list. And it's so important, because that makes them, you're talking about Brian Shaw, which I think is awesome. Like, what is it about Brian Shaw that drove him to be what he is? Like, there's something in Brian Shaw that has motivated him to be the 4-time strongman champion, and then to do all these other things. Like, those are the people, and I think that everybody is this to a certain degree, but like, what is it, right? How do you start your day? And there's millions of self-help books out there that you can see in Barnes and Noble that basically are capitalizing in a monetary way on that. Like, what's the blueprint for success, right?
Yep. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. So part of why I'm interested in Brian Shaw is he's done something that's so difficult. And that's, I'm interested in anybody that's done something that is that difficult. Whether it's being a Navy SEAL, being a world strongman, Tom Brady, starting your own successful business that runs for decades, or it's amazing to me that every day, or well, maybe not every day, but the vast majority of days, some people have tapped into something that motivates them. And I'm not saying the motivation is easy. I'm not saying they wake up 95% of their days ready to go. But 95% of their days, they find some way to get the work done, to get unstuck. I
want to say something to that. Yeah. So Friday I went to the gym, and I was kind of going through the motions.
Sure.
And so I lifted some weights, and then I went to swim.
Yep.
And I'm like, in my mind, the whole time when I was swimming, Dustin, I'm like, it's Friday.
Sure.
Because I'll usually swim a mile.
Yep.
And I'm like, it's Friday. You know, I think I'll just do half.
Sure.
And then I got to half, and I'm like, I'm just going to stop. And then something inside me said, dude, do a mile.
Sure.
Like, dude, do a mile.
Yep.
And I do another lap. Dude, you could stop now, but just do it. Just do another lap.
Yep.
Just do another lap.
Yep.
And And I did a mile, and I did not want to. But my point is there's gonna be like I felt so good after that. Like I felt so good, and I think the integrity piece with my sobriety is really kind of honing in. Like
sure,
like I'm more aware now, Dustin, of when I don't do something and it bugs me.
Sure.
And so I want to accomplish things, right? It was minus 14 degrees out. I almost texted Dustin to say, dude, it's too cold. Like, I'm not coming over. And then I thought, that's stupid.
Yeah.
Like, get in your car and go over to Dustin's house. But who cares? Like, be a person of integrity and character, because your character is defined by your patterns of behavior. And other people see that. I have friends where, they say, but they don't do, right? They don't follow through. I used to be that kind of person. Your characters defined your patterns of behaviors in the past, and other people see that. If your character is always going to lean towards the weaknesses or the soft spots, your character is defined about how many soft spots you have, right? How many weaknesses you have, and what you're doing to address them, right? So, I don't know. This is a good topic, and I feel like it's a topic that is resonant for a lot of people that I know personally about. I feel stuck, and what's next, and what's my purpose, and I don't know if there's any roadmap other than just you have to be intentional and self-aware, and it's going to be different for everybody. Right. For me, it's a weekly achievement list. I think you should try it and see if it works for you.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to try it. I definitely think it's going to help.
Put it right here.
Yes.
Because it seems like this is sort of your core, your command center. Just put it right there, a legal pad, yellow or white, and just, weekly achievement, February 7th through February 14th. And then write down 5 things or 10 things, and every time you do it, check it. And then you know what? Come Sunday, like it's a little piece of paper with check marks on it that's gonna trigger you. It's like it's unconscious, or it could trigger you in another way, in a negative way. Like I didn't do freaking anything, which is fine,
I think I'm hopeful that I really think the COVID thing is it's been a while now that people have been socially distancing, and restaurants are closed, then they're not, then they're closed, then they're not, and everybody's working from home. And I used to think working from home would be great all the time. Now I still think working from home has its benefits because there's less interruption, but I think you can't miss out on that social interaction of being at work with other coworkers, and even if it's something so simple as bitching about the boss, you need that interaction. So
I was just gonna say, you said something that sparked. So an organization is a perfect example of a community of movement.
Sure.
Okay. And you know what I mean, right? So you and I work together. We go there. There is a purpose that we are intentional about. That we are self-aware enough to know that I need to do part B, C, and D, and then Dustin does E, G, and F, and then that's movement that makes the organization or the organism propel forward. Without that, right now with COVID, people are feeling stuck. Because they literally are.
Right.
Because we're virtually doing kind of the movement.
Right.
But not. I think our minds need that. So that's brilliant. That's
and I think that kind of leads me to the whole, this is why experts say that social media isn't a replacement for in-person relationships. There is something about that physical togetherness.
Even just sitting here now.
Right. It's a different thing than if we did this over the phone or Zoom or whatever. And so I think that's really important too, of getting unstuck. It's remembering that it's getting mentally unstuck, and for a lot of people, I think in modern America, it's getting physically unstuck.
Mm-hmm.
It's physically doing some sort of movement each day
Mm-hmm.
to get your body going,
Mm-hmm.
and that affects your mental health too.
It does.
Yeah.
And I think the one-on-one or just the social interaction, it sort of it catalyzes our mirror neurons in our brain, which helps us be more empathetic towards each other.
Yep.
It helps us read each other better.
Yep.
There's an energy, and some people may not be able to pick up on it. I certainly do. I think you do.
Yep.
It's just a frequency, right? It's a frequency that you share, whether it's conscious or unconscious, but it's there.
Yep.
And I think, I think we seek that out inherently because that's just how we're wired as human beings. And I think once COVID is over, I think people are going to, optimistically, I'm thinking there's just going to be this just massive sort of jubilation and whether it's recognized or not, of just being able to go to a football game again,
right,
or a concert or a street festival or an art fair.
Yep.
Like, just that is going to be for, and I'm just thinking personally, that's going to be for me like, oh, people, and then you can retract and you can kind of go back in your, in rest, but anyhow.
All right. Well, I think we're good there, and I certainly enjoyed our conversation. Hopefully people listening, hopefully there was something in our discussion that sparked your interest, whether it was a weekly achievement list or simply getting physically or mentally unstuck.
Or even just thinking about what is it that I love about, what are my gifts?
Yeah.
Because maybe your gifts are going to be what your purpose is.
Right.
And so maybe not necessarily, if you're not even at the weekly achievement, like I need to accomplish my purpose in this way, maybe you just sit down and you write down the things that you love doing.
Yeah.
What does it look like for you to have the perfect job, for example,
sure,
or profession?
Yeah.
Or what areas of your life do I derive the most enjoyment?
Yeah.
And leave no stone unturned. I mean,
right.
I enjoy sleeping in on Saturdays.
Sure.
I enjoy cooking. I enjoy traveling. Like, somewhere in there's going to be a game plan if you're a person that feels stuck.
Yeah.
There's going to be like, oh, well, maybe I become a travel food writer. Or
sure.
maybe I start a travel food blog.
Yeah.
Or, again, I'm just making up examples. But, so, Dustin, I love it. It's intentional self-awareness.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we want to keep pushing forward until it doesn't seem like it's necessary.
Right.
But there is that theme of, as a Christian, we need to be intentionally self-aware about ourselves and our relationship with Christ and how we can build our purpose so we can make God's kingdom the way that he intended it to be.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So, amen.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening. Hopefully, whenever you listen to this, whether it's next week, next month, or 2 years from now, you can take away something and help yourself get unstuck. Another big thing that I'll just throw in real quick is find somebody that has similar interests.
Yes.
And ask them to help you if
Great
you need
point.
it. That's
we need each other.
Right. Absolutely. So, all right, guys. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right. Have a great week.